The frame is built, the roof is on, but what goes on the roof? Keep watching to find out what the project dreamers dreamt up in part 3 of this epic saloon chicken coop build.
So before I can start cutting any wood, I need to have a pretty good roadmap of what this coop's going to look like. So I've really did a rough sketch of what I plan on building, and next step is to start cutting some wood. Now, I've mentioned on several occasions that we've repurposed a lot of our wood in order to build our projects. So I wanted to share with you, this is a piece of ash that was actually from a bookcase. Now we're going to rip this into 3.5 inches, and it's going to be part of the structure of the cupola. The material's now been ripped to 3.5 inches, so now let's cut our 45s. Now that we've cut our first 45, we're going to flip the miter saw and cut the other end. But we want to make sure that these are all the same length, so let me set up a stop block. Now I know what you're saying, this cupola is going to be pretty big, and at 30 inches square and probably about 4 feet tall, you're right. But once it goes up on the top of the shed and it's about 16 feet in the air, it's going to look a lot smaller. So if I was to proportion it to 24 inches or 18, it just wouldn't look right. So I think this is the proper dimension for the shed we're building, which is 12 by 14. Before I fasten this together, I'm going to cut a 45 on the edge of this box, because once the coop's together and rain starts falling off the roof, you want this to be able to shed the water. Now, it may not be apparent now, but as we get further along in the build, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
To secure the 45s together, we drilled 2 holes and countersunk using 2.5-inch long deck screws as well as glue.
Now, I may have mentioned previously that I was going to bevel the side of this cupola before I assembled it, but after some thought, I figured I'd just use my chamfering bit in my Ryobi router.
Unfortunately, the Ryobi trim router doesn't have any dust collection, but there are makers out there that have 3D printed an exhaust port, and that's on our wish list.
The platform's completed, and now it's time to start the actual cupola, the build. This is going to be an arched area. It'll have plexiglass and a light inside. Now this is the corner molding, and they're made up of 1x3s. And if I was to turn around and just fasten them together, one side would be 3/4 of an inch thicker than the other side. So I have to take this over to the table saw and rip it, take off 3/4 of an inch. So that's the next step. After I've made a bunch of these, 8 actually, to 24 inches. You can see now that both sides are identical. Each are 3.5 inches.
We made a template for our arch on a piece of paper and transferred it to one of the side panels of the window, which would become our pattern for the remaining 3 sides. Now we are sizing our panel to the correct width. Then we brought it over to the bandsaw to cut the arch, and then off to sanding.
There we go, one perfect arch. Now I just need to make 3 more for the other windows.
Now we're transferring the templates to the other 3 boards that will be our arched windows for the cupola.
Now I've never made a window before, and what I'm told is these inserts are actually called mullions. I had some scraps of maple left over from the library project that Mandy and I did. Although this is the perfect material, it's just a little too thin. So I'm going to cut some more pieces that we have left over, get this to fit.
The mullions are recessed into the frame. Not the traditional manner of installation, we're cheating a bit here. But from a distance you won't be able to tell that the plexiglass is still on the back side and is not actually sitting in the mullion. Here we're cutting a dado for them to sit in.
Now this is the first frame I made, and I'm using it as a template for all the other cuts. So basically I'm taking all my pieces and I'm referencing right off of the top of this window. And then I'm grabbing my lines right from there, referencing where I need to cut. So essentially every single window should be identical. Well, that's the plan anyway. Now that I have all my pieces cut, I'm going to assemble the frame. And in order to do that, I'm going to use the Craig jig. Now for those of you who are not familiar with it, basically it puts pocket holes in the side of this, and when you add glue, this makes for a really strong joint.
It's time to assemble the first frame. Although pocket joinery is strong, we always add glue. Now that the frame is assembled, we're test fitting the faux mullions, which fit perfect. Let's glue them up. These are only secured with exterior wood glue, so we're adding a liberal amount before clamping.
So here you have it, one complete window. One down, 3 to go. Now I chose not to pin nail this to secure the mullions to the frame of the window because I don't want to risk cracking it. And you know what? In all reality, it really doesn't need it. This Titebond glue will be more than secure to hold this mullion in place. Also with some good clamps, and usually I let them set up for about 24 hours before I take the clamps off just to ensure there's a good glue joint. So before I started shooting today, I wanted to make sure that we'll basically do a test. And I put a chamfer bit in my router and I routed around the stiles and the rails to give a little bit more custom feature. And I stopped just before I went around the trim of the window. And after looking at it, I really think that detail needs to occur all the way around the window.
We're going to secure this window to the base using our Craig jig to make some pocket holes. Now that all 4 window frames are complete, we can assemble them on the base. With lots of glue, clamps, and screws, this base is solid.
Now pocket screws are great, but I clamped the bottom because anybody that's ever installed anything using pocket screws, they have a tendency to push the work out. So these clamps will ensure that everything stays in place. Today I mocked up the roof to determine what pitch I wanted to have. Now this is a 7/12 pitch, which is about 31.5 degrees. Now that pitch is important because it's going to mirror the pitch on the chicken coop, and I really think that that'll look really good from the ground. Now I'd love to be able to build all this in one piece, and I still need to build the base for it, but it would just be too heavy. So there's basically 3 components of this cupola. There'll be the base, the body, and then the roof section.
To build our roof, we started by building a platform that will sit on the top of the window frames. We're using 2x4s ripped in half.
Well, the moment of truth is to see if this fits. Perfect fit, great foundation for building the roof.
The roof structure is made up of 1x6s, and here we're cutting a bird's mouth that will sit on the top plate. Time for a test fit. And as you can see, we replicated the other 2 rafters.
The roof is only temporarily fastened with a couple screws up here. Now I can't fasten it with a screw down the middle because this is going to have a weather vane, and I'm going to drill a hole down through the middle, and I don't want to hit a screw. So I'm going to use some metal fasteners on the side to permanently secure that and then drill a hole through the middle. I'm on the miter saw. You might have seen I did a compound miter here. The reason is so that I can put the fascia board across here and have a 90-degree angle on both sides.
Here we're starting by installing the soffit around the perimeter. Time for sheathing using 1/2-inch OSB. Now that the sheathing has been installed, we can install the fascia board and then the drip edge, which is the last step before we add our shingles.
This roof is going to have cedar shingles. Now, unfortunately, these cedar shingles are very utility grade. The difference between a utility grade and a premium shingle, $73 for one bundle versus like $13 or $14. So I'm going to take the added steps to step flash the ridge. Might be overkill. This roof shouldn't leak at all, but I'd rather take the time to do it right now than to try to do it when it's up on the roof and leaking. So I'm struggling with these shingles. because they're seconds. They're not premium shingles, so they split. So I'm gonna try drilling them at least until I get into the body. But I'll probably have to do this all the way up and be a tedious process. But I guess you get what you pay for. The roof's almost done, but there's just one more step. I need to turn around and cap its corner. And to do that, I have to cut it at a 45 and then join these two together. I'll do that on the table saw. But in reflection, couple tips. I use number 2 shingles. Don't ever do that again. Go with the premium shingles. It's not worth it. The amount of waste from knots to try to avoid more than makes up for the additional cost in buying premium shingles. Also, they crack. It's just, don't do that. But this is my first attempt at working with cedar shingles. And the next time, if I ever have enough courage to do this again, I'll buy premium shingles.
We started by cutting a 45-degree miter on the cedar shakes, which will cover the hip portion of the roof. Now we're working our way up the roof and using glue and pin nails to hold them in place.
The cedar shake roof is completed. Well, not really. I still need to figure out what I'm going to do for a cap up there, and because a weather vane is going to be secured up there, and I still need to drill a hole. Now I was going to lead flash the top of that, but then when I went to go look for the lead flashing, it's $180 a roll, and I only need a couple feet, maybe even a foot. But I think I'm going to put a cedar cap on top, and then that way it'll add a nice finishing touch and it'll keep it from leaking.
We went back outside and were able to complete and determine the pitch of our coop roof. The base we built consists of 2x4s. You can see how easily the body of the cupola attaches to this base. Next step is cutting the angles to accommodate for the pitch of the roof. As you can see here, the base will be secured to the roof and it will allow us to easily assemble the 2 other sections because this thing is heavy. Once we were done building the cupola, we added some finishing touches with some paint. This rooster once stood proudly at the entrance of our coop, greeting visitors as they stepped inside. We thought it deserved a place of honor as the perfect mascot atop our cupola. With a bit of creativity, I revived its vibrant feathers through careful painting, bringing it back to life. Now it crowns our Silkie Saloon, adding a unique and personal touch that truly sets it apart. We thought shingles were expensive. We purchased 2 sheets of plexiglass at an 1/8 inch thick to use as our faux windows. I think we spent over $80 on the plexiglass, which is crazy. We secured the plexiglass in place using screws and latex caulk. Now it's time to get this cupola on the roof. As you can see, the base has already been installed, and we've secured the cupola itself, topped off with the weather vane. For scale, our helper stands at an impressive 6 foot 5 inches tall, yet the rooster adds another foot to that height. This cupola is absolutely massive, and it took about 2 weeks of hard work to build. The weather vane, gifted to us by our good friend Bobby, thanks Bobby, needed a bit of welding, but it came together beautifully. The final result is a true showstopper.